Hello, my name is Dr. Joseph Crumbly. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and family therapist, and I'll be presenting to you on the subject of loss and ambivalence. This presentation is one of a three-part course developed specifically for kinship caregivers, and the title of this course is Coping with the Unique Challenges of Kinship Care. You're now about to watch a video clip of me presenting to an audience of caregivers in which I'll be addressing three questions. The first question will be, when and why is it necessary to ask the questions, should I and can I be a caregiver? The second question I'll be addressing is, should I and can I continue being a caregiver? And the third question I'll be addressing is, what are the processes, the steps, the sources of information for answering those questions? For those of you in the viewing audience, I have three questions that I'd like you to answer while you're watching this video. The first question is it time for me to be asking, should I and can I be a caregiver? Is it time for me to be asking, should I and can I continue being a caregiver? And what are the sources of information that would be helpful for me in answering these questions? So please sit back, relax, and I'll rejoin you at the conclusion of this videotape, and I'll summarize then the training. Thank you. Should I and can I continue to be a caregiver is the question I'd like to address with you today. Now, just from the looks on your faces, I'm feeling as though you've already answered that question. Should I, and can I continue being a caregiver? And some of you might already be saying, I have no choice. I have to be a caregiver. My responsibility and my commitment to my children obligate me. So whether I want to or not, whether I like it or not, it doesn't make any difference. I have to be a caregiver. Okay, I can understand you saying that, but let me respond to you by saying this. You may not have a choice but to ask those questions. You may, in fact, be obligated to ask those questions out of your responsibility to the children. In fact, obligation may not be enough of a reason for being a kinship caregiver, and I'll explain why. The first reason is because of changes in circumstances over time. So here's my question to you. I'd like all of you that are here to raise your hand if you plan to be caring for children from 1 to 5 years or more. Those of you who plan to be caring for children and raising your children from 1 to 5 years or more, raise your hand. Yeah, it should be all of you. Yep, yeah. Because you're doing it right now. So everybody's hand should be up. Okay, you got it. Okay. Now, how many of you plan to still be caring for children for another 5 to 10 years or more? Please continue holding your hands up. So if you're going to be caring for your children for another 5 to 10 years, your hands should be up. That's most of you. If you notice, most of your hands are still up. You went right back up again. Okay. How many of you will be caring for children for another 11 to 15 years? Please raise your hand. If God wills, that's right. Another 11 to 15 years. Raise your hand. Okay, I've still got about half the hands up. How many of you will be raising children for another 16 to 20 years? If you've got children 5 years old or younger, your hand should be up. Oh, I see some hands popped up now. Okay. Yeah, if you got them 5, 6 years old, yeah, you might be raising them for another 15, 16 to 20 years. If you notice, I didn't say 18. Children don't leave at 18 any longer. The average time now is 20 to 23. And after they leave, guess what they do? They come back. Okay? Somebody said, don't say that. Yeah, they come back. All right? But we're going to start with just 20. 20 years. Okay, now here's what I'd like you to now do. Whatever that number was for you in terms of how many years you expect to be caring for your children, please now add that to your age. I heard some folks go, yeah. Please add that to your age. And now here's my question. How many of you will still be caring for children and you're going to be at the ages between 40 and 45? Please raise your hands, or older. If you're going to be 40 to 45 or older and still have children, you got it, right? All the hands are up, right? If you're going to be 40 or 45 or older and still caring for children, your hand should be up. If you plan to still be 46 to 50 and still raising children, please hold your hand up. 51 to 55 years old, please hold your hand up. 56 to 60, still raising children, please hold your hands up. Folks, I see some folks holding their arm up now. Oh, she had to hold her hand up. That's right, 55 to 60. Okay, 61 to 65, and you're still raising children. I see half the hands are still up. 66 to 70. Okay, all right, hands are still up. 71 to 75. Yeah, oh, yes, sir. We've got 2 men in the audience, by the way. All right. 76 to 80. Okay, we still have some hands up. Okay, yeah, 76 to 80. All right, how about 81 to 85? Thank goodness. Okay, I was hoping we didn't have to go any further than that. But do you see my point? 5 years, 10 years, 11, 15, 20 years raising children. Some of you may be 30, 35, 40, 55, 60, 65, still raising children. There just may be some changes in circumstances over time. Your finances, your housing, your resources, your health, your partners, the promises get changed or broken. Things change over time. And those changes may force you to ask the question, should I and can I continue being a caregiver? There's another reason why you have to ask that question. The way most of you came into kinship care, it was in a crisis. It was unplanned. It was by default. And without support when the children first came in. Foster parents that are non-relatives, when they become foster parents, it's planned. They pursue it. It's voluntary, and it's with support before the children come into their homes. You see the difference? Because of how you come into kinship care, that can cause you to be ambivalent and to be unsure. Foster parents, they know they want to be a foster parent. They know it, they plan it, they pursue it. Relative caregivers, you didn't plan it. I'll be more specific. How many of you called DHS up and said, listen, I'd like to pursue a career as a kinship caregiver, and could you put me on that waiting list to become, y'all don't even taking me serious. And could you put me on that waiting list to become a caregiver? Anybody do that in here? Oh, okay. Foster parents do that. They pursue it. They plan it. It's a career path. Foster parents, let me ask you this. How many of you said, well, when I have more time on my hand and when I have more resources and when I'm ready to give back to my family and the community, I'm going to get guardianship of my niece and nephew, I'm going to get custody of my grandchildren, and I'm going to bring them home and raise them for the rest of my life. Any of y'all talk that way? Foster parents talk that way. So because of how you become a caregiver, it makes you wonder and you're unsure and unclear. So that's the second reason why you have to ask those questions. There's a third reason why too. How you feel about being a caregiver, whether or not you want to become a caregiver, does make a difference. We've got research that shows that children do better in kinship care than in non-relative foster care. But we also show that relative caregivers show signs of more depression than foster parents. And we also have information and research that shows that the children are affected by how you feel. So how you feel does make a difference, whether you want to, whether you like to, whether it feels okay for you to be a caregiver, you have to ask those questions because it affects the children, okay? So that's what the research is showing. So when do you know you have to ask those questions? Let me have you go back to the moment you realized that the children weren't leaving and that they were coming and staying. Here's my question to you. What made you realize that you should become a caregiver? Give me 4 or 5 words and I'll just holler it out. What made you decide you should do it? Crisis. Chronic homelessness. What made you feel as though you should? Have issues with my daughter. Help with my daughter. Health issues of my daughter. Thank you, sir. Yes. Baby abandoned by its mother. Yes, ma'am. Incarceration of the parent. Yes, ma'am. Sudden death of my daughter. Okay, those were the reasons why you felt as though you should do it. What were the reasons that made you know that you could do it? Obligation made you feel as though you could do it. What else made you realize that you could do it? DHS assignment. Yeah, the social worker, Department of Health and Human Services. Yes. I had space and time. I've been doing it since I've been 21. So you had the history and the experience of having done it before. Yes, ma'am. Obligations to my grandchildren made me know that I should and could do it. Yes, ma'am. The experience, I already raised 6, so I'm better the second time around. Okay, all right. The children needed help. I had no choice. And let me summarize some of the things you said. Keep the child in the family, avoid the trauma of going into foster care, helping out the birth parent, giving them a chance to get themselves together, the obligation, the resources, and no one else would do it. Which means sometimes that no one else can do it, okay? And then when you looked at the reasons for why you thought you could do it, I had the finances, I had the time, I had the health, I had the support system, I had the emotional support and capacity to do it. When you need to ask the question, if I and should I, these are the reasons why it's time to ask those questions. When there are obstacles and barriers between what you should do and what you can do, you need to ask the question, can I and should I? When there are changes and obstacles and barriers between what you have been doing and what you can do, you need to be asking the question, should I, can I? And if you don't want to be a caregiver, or if the effects of being a caregiver on you have been too much to the point where it's starting to affect who? The children. Then you've got to start asking the question, should I and can I? Because you've got to be okay for the children to be okay. So what are the steps? You've got 6 steps here. You've got to give yourself permission. You want to make informed decisions. You want to commit to the process, identify the tasks, set up monitoring, and you want to set up a plan. And I'm going to go through each one of those. The first step is giving yourself the permission to ask the question. Now that sounds crazy. Give yourself permission to be selfish on behalf of the children. You know where I got that from? I got that from flight attendants who will tell you, please put your mask on first before helping anyone else who might need assistance. Now that sounds like a contradiction. That sounds real selfish. I'm gonna put my mask on first instead of helping somebody else who needs it? No, it makes sense. You've got to be conscious in order to help the other person. So for kinship caregivers, you have to know when to put yourself first so that you can continue putting the children first. Does that make sense? You've got to know when to make yourselves a priority in order to keep the children a priority. So you have to give yourself permission, and the conversation with yourself is this: I have to be okay in order for the children to be okay. I have to take care of myself first in order to take care of the children. What will happen to the children if something happens to me? And I don't want to traumatize the children if they're removed because I can't take care of them. Second step, you need to be able to this time make the decision, not in a crisis or under pressure, but this time the decision needs to be informed. You need to know when enough is enough, and you need to know when to say yes and when to say no. So your conversation sounds like this. When I initially decided to become a caregiver, I did it based on loyalty, as someone said, on guilt, on obligation. I did it while I was in a crisis without a plan. This time, I want my decision to be informed and based on facts. I may need to say no if I have to give less than to those children than what I already have? Step three, you need to commit to the process. You need to allow yourself a chance to figure out if you should do it and if you want to do it before you say you will do it. Caregivers miss that whole step of being able to ask, do I want to and should I do it? They come in already saying, I will do it before you know you want to. You need to give yourself a chance to figure out if you want to, and here's your conversation. I need to first know if I should and can be a caregiver before I commit to being a caregiver. It's only fair that I have time with the child to determine if it's in the child's best interest for us to live together. Those first 3 months, if you're thinking about becoming a caregiver, you want those first 3 months to be a trial situation. This is a trial situation to see if it's in the child's best interest, because you don't want the child to be traumatized again. This is called safety planning for the children. You want the children to be able to not have to be worried about another broken what? Promise. And you don't want the children to have the experience of being hurt by those closest to them, which has happened to them before. So that's why you need to take time to have this experience. Identify those tasks, those resources, and here's your conversation. What do I need in order to consider or continue to take care of these children? What accomplishments will let me know if I can permanently care for the children? How many beds do I need? How much clothes do I need? How much food needs to be in the house before I even start this? How many children need to be registered for school? What's the minimal resources you need to have in place to know that you should even try? Number 5, set up a feedback system. Conversation sounds like this. How and who will I let know if things are getting overwhelmed or if I'm having second thoughts? That's important because you're supposed to have second thoughts. It's normal. Don't feel guilty about it. You didn't plan this. It was in a crisis. It was unexpected. So it's normal for you to have second thoughts. But you need to have a safe place where you can let people know that it's getting to you. And number 6, what's my alternative plan going to be? What's my relationship going to be to the children if I do decide that I can't do it? This is prevention planning. This is all about preventing you to getting to the point where you're picking up that phone, calling up DHS and telling them to do what? Come and get them. That's what this is all about, prevention planning. So, in conclusion, obligation, guilt, and loyalty is not enough of a reason to be a caregiver. You need to also want to, and you need to also be able to handle the effects of being a caregiver. And I make the distinction between the two. You may want to, but can you handle it? You may want to, but can you have handled the effects of being a caregiver? So you got to be able to do both. Knowing you should and knowing you can be a caregiver also have to be part of the reasons for continuing to be a caregiver. So thank you so much. I hope you find this useful and continue doing the great work that you're doing. Thank you. Welcome back. I'd like to summarize this presentation by starting off with the question, why do you need to ask the question, can I, should I continue being a caregiver? The 2 reasons that I can think of as to why you should ask the question. Number 1, changes in circumstances over time. If you remember when we did the presentation, in the previous presentation, people were talking about caring for children for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Some people are going to be in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. Circumstances change over time, so that's one of the reasons why. The second reason why you need to ask that question is because how you feel about kinship care does make a difference. How you feel about kinship care impacts your children and their behavior and their sense of well-being. When will you know you need to ask the question? You'll need to know, for those of you who are considering it, you need to know based on whether or not your resources are there to match whether or not you can. For those of you who are continuing to be a caregiver, you need to make sure that the resources that you had in place in the past that allowed you to be a caregiver continue to still be there so that you can continue to be a caregiver. The steps you need to follow in case you have to ask those questions are give yourself permission to be selfish. You've got to be able to say to yourself, it's okay for me to ask the questions because I have to be okay for the children to be okay. Step 2, You want it to be an informed decision. This time you want to be able to make the decision not based on being in a crisis or under pressure. The third is commit to the process. In other words, commit to finding out if you can become and want to become a caregiver before you decide that you will. Identify the tasks and the benchmarks that'll let you know that you can. Set up a feedback system so that people will know how you're feeling, whether or not you're having second thoughts, how it's working out. And then number 6, what's the alternative if you decide that you can? These steps are what we call prevention planning. Prevention planning for your children starts with prevention planning for yourself. And prevention planning for yourself means being able to ask the question, should I, can I continue being a caregiver? Thank you so much.